Welcome to another episode of MV on the Move. I'm your host, Nikki Frenney, Vice President of Customer Success at MV Transportation. Let me take you into a moment every transit leader hopes never comes, but knows eventually will. It's the moment when systems go down, communication is disrupted, and within minutes it becomes clear this is no longer a routine issue. It's a full operational challenge. In August of 2025, that moment became very real for the Maryland Transit Administration. A ransomware attack disrupted critical systems, including mobility paratransit scheduling, forcing an immediate shift in interim processes while teams worked to stabilize operations. While core services continued, the impact on paratransit riders, some of the most vulnerable customers we serve, was significant. And in the moment, two things mattered most: how quickly teams could respond and how effectively they could respond together. Because public transit does not stop. Riders still need to get to medical appointments, to work, and to the essential parts of their daily lives. This episode is about partnership in moments like that. Not focused on a single incident, but on what it takes to navigate disruption, how trust and communication are built in advance, and how teams come together to support frontline staff and maintain service continuity under pressure. I'm joined today by Holly Arnold, Administrator of the Maryland Transit Administration, and Stephanie Dowdy, Vice President of IT Operations and Professional Services at MV Transportation. Together, they'll share how strong partnerships, experienced teams, and reliable systems help minimize disruption, restore critical services, and keep the focus where it belongs, on the people who depend on transit every day. Because at its core, transit is not just about operations, it's about people and making sure we never stop showing up for them. Let's get into it. Okay, first I want to thank both of you for joining me today. I truly appreciate your willingness to really share your perspective and kind of walk the audience through an experience that, while challenging, offers important lessons for transit agencies across the country. Holly, Stephanie, it's great to have you both here. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And before we dive in, I'll just say one of the things that stands out about this is the leadership. In leadership is clear that you all put people first. And I think that perspective is going to come through in this conversation. So let's start at the beginning and kind of put in context what happened, right, for our audience. Holly, I want to take you back to that weekend when all of this happened. When did you first realize that something was wrong with your systems?
Oh man, I don't know if I want to remember going back. I've tried to block that out. So on Saturday afternoon, August 23rd, I got a call from my IT director that, hey, it looks like there may be something going on with our systems, and we're bringing in a bunch of experts from Microsoft to assist and kind of help take a look at what's going on here.
You're probably like, what do you mean?
I joined their call for a minute, and it scared me even more because a lot of IT, kind of things that I don't fully understand, but it was just like, oh, this is real, this is serious. And so set up some calls with my teams, letting them know, like, hey, this is going on in the background. We're still up and running, but like there's this risk here. And then unfortunately Sunday morning, 5:30 in the morning, I got a call from the IT director again. Hey, we're shutting our systems down to better kind of protect the rest of the system. And so, what that meant is everything went offline, really across the entire agency. So real-time information, all the systems that we use to provide service to our riders just really kind of went down at that time.
Oh my goodness. So I can imagine everybody was kind of in full panic mode because the heart of Baltimore in Maryland is its transit system.
Yes.
So I can imagine you all were thinking, what do we do? And Stephanie, how did MV end up getting involved?
Yeah, so first when we got the communication that they were having these issues, we went ahead to protect our environment and the environments of our other clients. We disabled some of our connection into the MTA environment just to make sure we were protected from that. But then we started to offline and in separate conversations talk about what could we do to remediate some of the issues if we needed to do that. And so started to look at how we would address those things from a strategy perspective, from an IT perspective, in case we were called upon to assist with spinning up a paratransit software environment for them.
And what does that entail? Like initially, when you get that first call and you understand that their systems are at jeopardy right now, right? What does that entail for, as a partner?
Yeah.
What does that entail for MV to help with the MTA getting back online?
Well, we got in touch with our local general manager, Avery Bowden and Nicole Ridgway, and started to understand a little bit more about the environment. But we actually host the paratransit software for 19 other clients in the cloud. And for us, it was, we started looking at, okay, how many servers do we need? What does our network capacity need to be? Do we need to go ahead and start spinning up a call center platform, which we have the access to do? So we started looking at that. I engaged all of the different resources across network, infrastructure, application, and telecommunications to start really understanding what that would look like and starting to map out those processes and what we needed to do in order to get them back up and running, at least on a temporary basis at the time, not knowing. So we started going down that path, working with our senior leaders, having that direct channel of communication so we could make those decisions in partnership with MTA, but going ahead and starting to identify ways we could remediate the problem.
And about how many paratransit riders were affected from that? Because I think that kind of gives context for people to know just how many people actually depend on transit, and when something like this happens, how it really kind of stops the local, it could stop the local economy because so many people are putting into it. So how many people were actually impacted?
So MTA we do anywhere between 5,000 and 8,000 paratransit trips every weekday, a little bit less on weekends, but we're a pretty large paratransit operation, getting people to work, to school, to doctors' offices. And so thankfully, the day before we went down, we had printed out the next week's worth of manifests. So anything that was booked at that time, we had available to us. But that was only about 2,500 trips a day. So less than half of our average trips were able to get out there. And even beyond that, because we didn't have call center operations, we couldn't call our riders. The operators were operating off of paper. Right? And I'm sure that happened long ago, but we've all transitioned into this digital world where people are very used to having access to those things. So both for our operators and for our riders, it was a huge overnight change, and the access that people had just was like drastically taken.
Paratransit services are specialized services for people with disabilities and seniors and others who cannot necessarily ride the fixed route service. So this is a very vulnerable population, and people that we a lot of times in this industry try to go the extra mile to make sure that they are accommodating. So I can imagine that getting that phone call, you probably were like, oh my goodness, how do we make this happen? And so I want to transition a little bit and talk about like partnerships, having the right partners. And this may sound a little bit self-serving because it is an MV podcast, but I feel like you had the right partner at the right time to be able to do that. Can you talk a little bit about how partnerships in times like this really matter?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, when my team got together Sunday morning, we laid out our top priorities, and number one was getting paratransit back up and running as quickly as we possibly could. And, I think, Stephanie mentioned they had already started thinking about what that would take. Could they do the cloud hosting? Could they get us moving on a call center? And, having that team available, the amount of hoops that we had them jump through, right? Like there's some, compliance things and other things, right? Like we just gone through a ransomware attack. We had to be sure that we were coming up safely and doing this in the right way. And your team jumped through the hoops, every single one that we put out there. Our teams worked really closely together. A couple times I kind of reached out to senior leadership when we were having issues, and, it was, Sunday night, late. Every time they answered the call, I'm pretty sure the teams worked 24 hours a day, and I'm not sure that Stephanie slept the entire time. But I mean, I really cannot say enough about the partnership and about the fact that we were able to get back up and running with the call center on that Friday afternoon.
Right.
Like that is just, we stood up a call center from scratch in 5 days.
And that is absolutely amazing. And one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about it, because people don't understand the level of partnership, professionalism, and intensity
Yes.
that goes in trying to stand up a system again, especially for such a vulnerable population. Stephanie, take us kind of into the war room
Oh,
and
yeah.
how these things, how you guys all coordinated and worked together to do this.
So when you talk about partnership, the first thing is trust, right? So we went ahead, like there was no, hey, we need to sign this contract. We need to, no, it was, we dive into the breach with our,
Yes.
with our client, right? And so in this particular case, I was working with our CEO, Harry Wilson, and our COO, Kevin Klicka. And I was saying, all right, these are, so the technical teams were doing what they needed to do to go ahead and spin up those environments. And I said, just work at that. And then we were looking at what does that solution really look like. Computers were needed, right? So we turned into kind of an intermediate Best Buy for a while. And so we were getting computers as fast as we could to those teams. We ended up remediating. There were well over 400 different MDTs in the vehicles, the terminals that their drivers used. And every one of them had to be touched to make sure that they were re-imaged and protected from any sort of potential ransomware that might have affected them. So we had boots on the ground within 24 hours. We flew in folks from different locations so they could work that while the team stood up the environment. But it was just, we were doing and we were asking and as we were doing, but we were moving forward because in the front of our minds was these passengers are going to suffer the consequences of a bad actors. So we were like, we're just going to make sure that it gets done. And we assembled a team of folks from a technical perspective, had direct, there was like the communications to our senior leadership, making sure everything, hey, we're going to do this. Is this okay? That was all our focus was at that time.
Yeah, and I feel like there probably was at no point where MV's leadership, our senior leadership team said, we're not doing this. I think you all had the autonomy
Yes.
to do whatever needed to be done to make sure we brought this system back up.
Exactly. It was an emergency situation, and we worked in an emergency capacity to make sure we were supporting our clients, supporting our passengers.
And I think the communication throughout, if I could just echo on that
Yes.
too, right? Like I was getting constant updates multiple times a day, what was going on, where were we, and had a very good sense, right? Like when something went wrong, it wasn't a smooth process, right?
Right.
Like immediately knew and understood like, okay, here's the impacts, here's what the timeline is. So I mean, I think the team did a great job of that.
I appreciate that, and that's good to hear that we were, the type of partner that you all needed at that time. What was the single most important thing that you needed from MV at the time? And then, Stephanie, I'm going to ask you, what was the single most important thing that our team needed from MTA at the time to really make this work?
I mean, I think it's that partnership, to the trust to get us up and running, and the time frame as well. I mentioned we had printed off a week's worth of manifest. We had manifest through Friday. Like if we did not get stood up that day, we were not going to provide any trips on Saturday. We just didn't have the ability to do it. And so the ability to deliver on that timeline and get us up and running so that we could start providing these trips again was so crucial.
And so, Stephanie, I'm going to go back to you to talk about what was the single most important thing that your team needed from MTA during this time?
I think what helped us most was the bidirectional communication, but the trust that we, as Holly mentioned, it wasn't going to be perfect, right? We knew we were going to stumble. There were going to be some things that didn't get done in the way that they needed to get done. So communicating to them to say, hey, look, this isn't going to be as pretty as you'd like it. And they're saying, hey, that's perfectly fine. I know that we worked with some of the consulting companies to let them become more comfortable with what we were doing. And we got the leadership on the MTA, the MDOT side even, that helped us navigate that relationship with those cybersecurity partners that they had. But basically, just the understanding and the communication between both, I think, was critical. I mean, it was great that we stood everything up and got everybody taking reservations by that Friday. But it wasn't as pretty as you'd want. But that's okay. It worked. It worked.
Well, describe that a little bit. You say it wasn't as pretty as we want. What do you mean?
On the day of, we had made a commitment that I believe it was going to be 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. Eastern, that we were going to be live with call center. we had to delay that. And so the local team, the MTA team, was very understanding of that, and they were just making sure that whatever they were communicating out to their passengers was conservative in that, right? So if we said it was going to be 10, they said let's make sure that what we communicate out. So that level of communication, knowing that things were going to be slightly delayed, helped us. But we were taking reservations by that afternoon.
MV has worked with MTA as a partner for a number of years, so we kind of know your systems, we know each other. But I think it's important to talk about how when you become partners, that initially you sign that contract and you all become partners, that you start to build those close relationships and that trust at that point, so that when something like this happens, it's not people trying to get to know each other to bring the system back up. It's people that have already made those relationships. Can you all talk about the importance of that when you become a partner to someone, or you bring a new partner in? How important is it from day one to really start building those relationships and break down those silos of us versus them, the vendor versus, or the client versus the contractor, and break those silos down so that when you have these type of crises and you come together, it's a little bit easier? Can you guys talk about that a little bit?
I would love to talk about that. In my mind, it was all about just getting the passenger where they needed to go. So there was no question, like, again, we just started building an environment. That's what we do. We call it running to the fire, because that's the way MV is with our clients and with MTA. And because of that relationship that was established years ago, we had the trust to say, you know what, we're going to resolve the problem. We'll worry about everything else later. We're going to resolve the problem now. And we're going to make sure that we do everything we can to do that. And we did something, again, reselling hardware, things like that we've historically not done. We did so in a trust environment. But again, because of that relationship established through them, really the overarching agreement years ago, we just went and did. And we didn't ask permission. Our CEO, COO was like, whatever you need, just make sure you get it done.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo that. And I think it does speak to the relationship that we've built over years since really the beginning of the contract, right? And, you mentioned your CEO and your COO at conferences set up time to chat with them, even if everything is going well, right? Just like a check-in, what's going on. But for us, our paratransit service is almost entirely contracted out. We have the call center is in-house employees, and we have a few operators, but the majority of operators, our QA, QC across the board is contractors. And so it can't be an us versus them relationship, right? For it to work, we have to be partners with our contractors. And honestly, our contractors need to be partners with each other. Like, the goal is providing the best possible service that we can. And I think our teams over the years have really done a good job of kind of integrating. The managers' meetings include our contractors in those meetings, so that everyone's hearing the same thing at the same time. We know what the goals are. We know what we're trying to accomplish. And MTA has even started, recognizing our operators, the contracted operators. They're not our employees, but we want to recognize the service that they're doing we do monthly and kind of quarterly operator recognition. And so we've brought them into that just to make sure that everyone can kind of see how critical they are and how much of a part of the team they are at MTA, even if they work for a different company.
And that's important. That's really important, because it also makes contracted employees, or those employees of the contractor, feel like what they do is important to the overall system. And how do trust and transparency influence your ability to respond quickly, Stephanie?
It is key. It is essential to it. I think I mentioned earlier, we will dive into the breach, right? We will dive into the breach arm in arm, hand in hand with our client, because we trust that relationship. And that makes it, again, there was no question what we were going to do. We were going to do what needed to be done. But again, we dive into the breach because of that trust, because of communication and a relationship that is, again, bidirectional in nature.
I like that. We dive into the breach. That's some IT speak.
We make it. That's the way IT becomes exciting, as you talk about things like that. So.
Now let's talk about the response itself, because a lot had to happen in a very, very short period of time. So Stephanie, by Friday, MTA was able to resume reservations, scheduling, and dispatch.
Yeah.
What had your team accomplished in those 5 days to make that possible?
Well, we did quite a few things. We really developed a full paratransit software environment in the cloud. Like I said, we host that for many other clients. We deployed a call center platform, set up all of the users in both of those different systems, making hundreds of users across the environment, setting up the credentials for all of those users, training the users on the new call center platform, because even though the software, the paratransit software was the same software, the call center platform was new. So training hundreds of users on the new call center platform.
In 5 days.
In 5 days. And then there, as I mentioned earlier, the mobile data terminals that are in the vehicles, those, because we weren't sure if they had been touched by the ransomware, we needed to re-image every one of those. And that required actually touching every one of those well over 400 devices, going on to every bus to do that. And in order to do that, we had boots on the ground. We had several folks flown in, worked 24/7. We had local teams working the operations to make sure that all of those things were done. So hundreds of users, making sure they had accounts and credentials in 2 different platforms, training them on the use of a call center platform, and touching over 400 devices in over 400 different buses.
Oh my goodness. That was a lot.
It was a lot.
In 5 days. So you all were able to do that in 5 days. In normal times, how long would that process take?
Ideally, probably 8 to 12 weeks.
Really?
Yes.
8 to 12 weeks, and you all were able to, with assistance from MTA and their IT department.
Yes.
But you all were able, as partners, to stand up a system in 5 days.
Yes.
We need to be winning some awards around here with
I-
APTA and
I keep talking about how amazing it is, like, and how impossible it was that we got stood up within 5 days. And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think the partnership is really what allowed that to happen.
And how did you at MTA support frontline employees during this intense operational period? Like, how did you all communicate to them and make sure everybody was on the same page to try to get this rolling again?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about our paratransit director, who was in person every day, chatting with the team, reassuring them of what was going on. They're union employees, so making sure we're doing communication to the unions and the shop stewards, so they knew what to expect on the call center in particular. And then, yeah, being able to train on a new system in that quick amount of time was really fantastic.
That was amazing. And how did you all communicate with the riders, just in case? Or did the riders not really feel anything because you all went into crisis mode and, getting everything back up? Did the riders not feel too much?
No, they definitely felt it.
Okay.
No, and so that was another big piece of it, was our communication with the riders. We partnered with the Department of Disabilities here in Maryland to help us with those communications and to amplify. And we did work with kind of other local jurisdictions to try and get the word out, posting on Facebook, all sorts of different social media. I was personally on the phone with some of our adult daycare centers and different areas just to make sure that people had a good understanding of what was going on.
So you're that kind of administrator.
Oh,
you
man,
get down in the weeds, and that's important.
No, I mean, just this, I mean, you said this already, but the service that we provide here is so crucial. I mean, it is in some cases life or death, right? Like being able to get people to dialysis matters so incredibly much, and to cancer treatments and all the other things that we're able to do with our paratransit service. So.
Yeah. And I don't think people really, and I can't stress this enough, I don't think the general public knows how much that matters in what we do. Like, every day we come to work to make sure we are providing a service that is critical to a lot of people. Transit is an economic engine in every community where there's one bus riding, right? Shut down the system, and we saw this during COVID. Shut down a bus system in one day in your city, and watch how it impacts everything that happens in your city. So transit is important, and those of us that wake up every day and get up to do this job do it because 90% of us have a heart for helping people, right? And how did maintaining service continuity impact public confidence in MTA?
I think the fact that we were able to get up as quickly as we did really helped to restore confidence in the system, in paratransit in particular. And on the core side, we were able to keep running service, so they had less impacts, although our real time wasn't working. And it's
Right.
one of those things like you know, again, once you're in this digital age and you're used to seeing it all the time, you don't realize how much you come to rely on.
I want to step back for a moment and talk about leadership. Holly, what did this experience reinforce for you about leadership during unexpected challenges?
Yeah, I think, you know, being able to make decisions when you don't know what the future is, you don't know what's going on, and, you know, and basically an uncertainty, I think is really crucial. And the other thing for me is, you know, my team, I gave them 4 things I wanted to accomplish, right? Like there's a million things we can worry about every single day, but I had my top 4, that's what we were worried about, that's what we were focused on, and everyone across the agency knew like that's what we were going for. And so it was restoring paratransit, making sure our operators get paid.
Right.
We do weekly payroll, and we did not miss a payroll, and I'm incredibly
You do weekly payroll here?
we do, and
Wow.
I was very nervous if we miss a payroll. What does that mean? Will people show up, right? And also, again, you know, people need to pay their bills. Their mortgages
right,
are coming out.
right.
So we did not miss a payroll. I wanted to pay our vendors, right? Like talk about good partnerships. If we don't pay our partners, they do start to get a little upset about that. That one took us a little bit longer. The real-time information for our core service riders, but everyone knew each day, hey, this is what I'm focused on each day.
Okay.
Here's what my key piece of this is, and I think that kind of very clear communication was really helpful in terms of leading the team in that time.
And so the ransomware attack happened to all of Maryland government, not just MTA?
Just
or
MTA.
MTA?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I thought it happened to everybody, but just to you all. Okay.
Yeah, no, and I'm thankful that it did not impact the rest
Yes,
of Maryland
yes.
government.
But you guys showed tremendous leadership and tremendous ability in partnership, you know, with MV to get that system back up. So
Well, and you know, speaking of Maryland government, I can't say enough about the support that we got from the rest of state government. I mean, we had our emergency management team was engaged, the governor was directly involved, the secretary was there with me on day 1 and day 2, and every day kind of checking in and providing support. And you know, all the different cabinet secretaries were kind of checking in and making sure we had the information that we needed and the tools that we needed. And
great.
like we just felt a tremendous amount of support from the
you
state.
had a lot of support.
Absolutely.
Again, great partnerships across state agencies
Yes.
also helped in this. And what did it teach you about preparedness?
I think we were not prepared for a cyber attack.
And how can you be in,
Yes.
you know, in this new world and all this technology and all the AI
Yeah.
and all these things? How can you really be? But
I mean, I think one thing, a huge learning experience for me is, so we have, every agency, right, has a continuity of operations,
Right.
right? You have your COOP plan.
Right.
And we pulled out the COOP plan, and it had this much on cyber.
wow,
And so,
yeah.
you know, this is a good opportunity for us to go back and, I think a lot of times we think about emergencies where like, oh, what if you have to go work somewhere else, but you still have all your tools available. And so what does it look like when your tools aren't available,
Right.
and how do you recover from that?
Yeah,
So we will be updating our
you
COOP
guys
plan.
will be I can imagine. And Stephanie, what lessons did MV take away from this experience?
To reiterate what Holly said, the continuity plan is always important, and we've learned this ourselves. Do we always need to be better? Yeah, you always need to be learning. We actually, I think for us in the last few years, ever since COVID, you know, there were all sorts of different things happen, and you know, technology challenges, but natural disasters and COVID, and you know, pandemics and workforce issues, things like that. We've developed that better and better, but it's a continuous evolution of that process, no matter what the effect, no matter what the issue is. If it is a natural disaster, if it is a technology challenge, we've gotten better ourselves.
Always striving
Yeah.
to get better. And transit is, we are prepared for natural disasters and snow and rain, but these cyber attacks sometimes take us in a whole different, you know, realm of how we do things. How has this whole experience shaped the way that you all think about resilience in transit? A lot of people don't really think about transit in the terms that we think about it, right? But how do you all think about resilience in transit? How did this experience show you how resilient we really are in this industry?
I'll say this. As I mentioned earlier, we run to the fire no matter what that is. And I don't think transit really hit home for me until a few years ago when I ended up taking reservations calls for another agency. and I met a lady on the phone named Cecile, and it was her first time taking a paratransit trip. And it was getting to know her. By the way, I am the worst call taker because that call lasted longer than it should have. But it was in her struggle, in the time that it was her first time taking a trip, and kind of some of the challenges she was facing because of that. That is what really hit it home for me. And so when I think of trying to get things back up and running again, I think about Cecile, and I think about making sure that she gets where she needs to go, and everybody else does as well. So it's like, we're just going and doing, and we'll figure it out. We're going to make some mistakes. We'll make quick decisions. We'll make some mistakes. We move on, and then, we'll figure that out.
Yeah. What about you, Holly?
No, I think I would echo a lot of that. And I think one of the other things that we saw too was on our core services. I mean, they went back to paper and pen, and we dispatched on paper and pen, and it reinforced how actually resilient the system is.
Yes.
But I think a good reminder, we are laying out a short and a long-term plan on how we can better improve our resiliency, right? Like there's reasons to do things in-house with your own servers. There's also reasons to look at the cloud, and so we're going to start evaluating how we do things a little bit differently, how we work with our partners. And then also making sure that we're still training on some of those old procedures, right? Like some of our dispatchers have been here for 30 years, and so they used to dispatch on pen and paper, and they a little rusty, but picked it right back up.
Yeah.
Some of our newer dispatchers,
had no idea.
They know the system, and that's all that they know. And so making sure that we're kind of training on all the different models, because I think it's a good lesson that sometimes you may have to go back to that.
And that's very important. That's something that, had this not happened, we didn't recognize that it was needed, right? That
Exactly.
your veterans and your kind of newbies working together to make sure that everybody knows how to do the work when we have these type of situations. Looking ahead, I think there are important lessons here for the entire industry. And we're going to wrap up shortly. But Holly, has this experience changed what you look for in a partner in any way?
I mean, I think, yes, partners that show up that even before we ask, start thinking about what we're going to need. I mean, that's what we're looking for in a partner, right? I don't want to have to be the one who comes and says, hey, have you thought about this? Can you work on this? Like, I want a proactive thought partner who's with us, who sees our challenges and is in it truly with us. And I think on our side, again, it's us recognizing, like, how are we being a better partner? I can't just, pay the invoice. I need to make sure that we're bringing people in early so that they can understand our challenges and be clear on that.
And that's critical in every situation, that we have clear communications and understand that, again, it's not these silos, it's not this us versus them. It's all of us working together to make sure we're providing the service that people deserve, that they want and that they deserve. And what advice would you give other transit agencies about building resilient partnerships?
And again, I think it's that early, often communication, project first, people first, and continue leading in with that, even when you get through problems, right? Like that is, if the team can get through problems with a people first or a project first mentality and approach, that's what takes you all the way.
And then Stephanie, from a client side, from a contractor side, I should say, what is one of the most important things when we win that contract and you are asked to come in and help with the IT team? What's one of the most important things that you need from a client to make sure that the partnership is successful moving forward?
Anything that you can call out that you know of, that you can document in the beginning is great, right? Knowing that some things kind of fall through, they're not really clearly defined. Understanding how those types of situations can be addressed is also important, because not everything can get documented clearly. So those things that might or things that you don't even anticipate at contract signature that might come into play. Those are the types of things where you will, if you've got the good communication, the good partnership, then you will figure those things out and then get those things documented, because there might be one of these situations, very different, you'll never know what you're going to encounter. So in those particular cases, if you have that communication, if you have that relationship, then those types of things can get figured out.
I appreciate that. And I think one of the successes that I've seen at MV over and over is that when we win a contract, we're not just focused on what's happening in that division. We try to get to know our counterparts throughout the agency. so that we have that open line of communication when something is happening, when we can't get the GM or we can't get the administrator because she's doing other great things. There's somebody in her office that knows us that we can reach out to and get things done. And we make that very apparent when we win a contract, that we want to know everybody in the agency. Stephanie, how do experiences like this influence how MV prepares to support agencies in the future?
One of the things, again, this is an evolution in terms of any sort of system outage, any sort of disaster, understanding and have a plan and preparedness ourselves. And one of the things that we find is we're always prepared to a point, but we're always having to refine that process. We've made a lot of strides in the last probably 10 years as a company, but it is you need to always be checking in to make sure that that process is still up to date. We've learned that ourselves, and we continue to have to evolve that as much as possible.
I love when we get together around a table at MV and we pull out best practices and we think this is the best one that we have, and then somebody comes in and has something that is 10 times better than the best practice that we thought we had. Because we have so many clients across the country, we get the opportunity to work with such a diverse group of people all over the country that we can pull something that we're doing in small Lake County, Florida, and duplicate it here in big Baltimore, and it works. And so we really appreciate having partners that allow us to work side by side with them and learn, their processes as we implement what we're doing, and that's very important. And we see that here in Baltimore, and we appreciate that. And we so appreciate your openness and your willingness to, anytime we call, anything we need, that you make it happen for us. We really appreciate that. You are one of the transit leaders that we admire. We admire your success. We admire what you're doing. And we are grateful to be your partner at MTA.
No, same. I appreciate that you guys keep answering my calls.
Ladies, thank you both really for your time, your leadership, and for sharing such thoughtful insight today. What stands out most from this conversation is that moments like this are never just about systems or technology. They are about people, the riders who depend on services every day, and the teams who show up to deliver it, no matter the circumstances. And what we've heard today is that strong partnerships are not built in the moment of crisis. They are built long before that through trust, transparency, and a shared commitment to doing what is right for the communities we serve. Because when something unexpected happens, and it will, the ability to respond effectively comes down to who is at the table with you, how well you communicate, and how prepared you are to move forward together. This conversation is a powerful reminder that resilience in public transit is not just about infrastructure, it is about relationships and strong partnerships. And when those relationships are strong, agencies are better equipped to navigate challenges, maintain continuity, and continuing delivering for the people who rely on them the most. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in to MV on the Move.